We are Irrational Labs. We've worked with hundreds of organizations to bring behavioral design approach into their processes. You may notice some of these companies we work with. They're cool companies. We're an interesting consultancy. If we were superheroes, we're not. But if we were, our story would start at Google. Over a decade ago, we were brought in and founded the behavioral economics unit there. We worked with over 25 teams to design and test interventions across the Google ecosystem. Since then, we've run over 100 experiments and we've trained thousands of people in the basics of behavioral design. We'll put the link in the chat, but we have over 30 case studies that you can read about how we've applied behavioral science to product and services. So we can use behavioral insights to innovate and grow your product. Some B-side training and AI strategy. If you're interested in any of those, please reach out to Katie at irrationallabs.com. She's one of our managing directors. She's here right now. So with that, Katie, tell us all about Marta.
Wonderful. Thanks, Ryan. So Marta, I'm so excited to bring to this group. I saw her talk about 6 months ago in the Netherlands at an experimentation conference that brought together leaders from all over the world. And she is the digital experimentation lead at A1 Telecom in Austria, which is basically the leading telecommunications provider, serves over 5 million mobile communications customers and over 2 million fixed access lines. And really why Marta is exceptional is she has led this award-winning experimentation program and brought it from 0 to 1. She's built the skills, the testing capabilities, the processes to support over 100 experiments a year, and really the whole shebang from ideation to design to analysis of experiments. And she's built up this capacity across multiple stakeholder groups to really have and embed a test and learn mindset and experimentation culture across their org. She's also leading their Gen AI and marketing initiative to build the skills and integrate the use of Gen AI into their marketing processes. And she's available for guest lectures and public speaking opportunities. But really, I think you guys are in for a treat. I saw her speak last November with these leaders from all over the world, and she was one of several speakers, but hers stood out because the message was one I thought would resonate with all of this group. So many of you are in organizations that you would not necessarily describe as digital first or experimentation first. And she really combated that topic head on in terms of like, what can we actually do about this to become more data-driven, to become more experimentation-minded, and actually see the results we want in terms of moving user or customer behavior. So without further ado, I bring you Marta.
Thank you very much for this lovely introduction and very fast speaking. I'm going to try and speak a little bit faster, or actually, if I tried that fast, I think I would still not manage it. So first
of all, coffee.
Me too. Let me see that first, that this thing is working properly. This is what we want to see. And please do tell me if you see the screen now properly.
Yeah, it looks great. We're wonderful.
Great. So hello to everyone from my side, and thank you for being here. So Katie said a lot of facts about me, but maybe a few funny things or fun facts about me that she didn't know, and I thought they might be interesting for Q&A later, and also because they might explain somewhat why I enjoy working on experimentation the last few years. So I recently learned that I have been born with optimizer's disease. I didn't even know this thing exists, but obviously it does, and I do have it. I'm a Formula One fan, but I never drive outside of the speed limit. And my favorite vacation is always at a seaside, although I am really afraid of swimming in the water. So there you go, interesting facts. You can ask questions about it later as well. Katie already presented some facts about A1 Telekom Austria, and today actually I want to tell you the story that we have built over the last three and a half years almost in a company that's big, that's traditional, that started out, back in the 1800s when as a post office actually, and it was developing, of course, with the telecommunication services. And the beginning of our story actually was about how to create a good and healthy environment where people are encouraged to run experiments. This was our challenge number one. And after that, we focused on getting the stakeholder buy-in, because you actually need to get all of the levels of the company to be involved and to get their buy-in before you can do any experiments at all. And we also took the time and rather unconventional methods how to build an understanding of the value of experimentation. Now, the value of experimentation is somewhat different of the value of products and services and activities that we do in the company. So we took special care how to build this understanding within the company. And how we felt we kind of reached this, from zero to hero, as I like to call it, or business as usual, is that we are daring to test the things that we think we already know. And this is a more difficult part, because if you don't know something, it's very easy to make a decision to test it, but it's a lot harder to actually decide to test something that you think you already know, or somebody else thinks that they already know, and there is no need to test it. So our story with experimentation began in 2022. This is the first time when the company actually hired 2 dedicated experimentation experts, so myself and another colleague of mine, and we've set up an official experimentation program. And we were really focused on getting, as many experiments to run within the division, that marketing division that we were working in, which comprises of 12 different teams. And we kind of put a lot of efforts in, but ended up having less than 30 experiments overall in the first year, which was quite shy. And they were quite ad hoc, and they didn't account to a large business impact at the end. But this didn't bother us as much as the fact that experimentation was just seen as another topic that people had to do. It came like on top of everything else, and it was oftentimes deprioritized because there was no understanding, there was no buy-in. What is the value of experimentation overall? Fast forward to the end of 2023, we almost tripled the volume of our experiments. So 95 experiments launched in this year. And one thing that we were really proud of, we had all 12 teams which were running at least some experiments. Not everybody was at the same level. Some were running experiments all the time. Others had just a few, but that's okay. This democratization of experimentation started to basically to take place. We also measured for the first time a really nice revenue impact, 7 digits. So we got the attention of the senior management as well. And we had basically 4-time year-over-year growth in the impact, in the revenue impact. And one thing that came interesting in the retrospective sessions that we held at the end of 2023 is that colleagues were highlighting experimentation as one of the most interesting or the best new things that they were working on. So we saw definitely a change in the way how we perceived experimentation and how much interest we actually got within the division to run the experiments. And last year, we continued to grow slowly. So we reached this magic 3-digit number, so over 100 experiments. But we actually shifted the focus a little bit, as opposed to the first 2 years when it was volume. We needed to get as many experiments into the pipeline as we could, into basically saying, you need to really think through what you want to test. And you need to use data for coming up with the ideas. So we said, all right, of course, we want to continue growing in the number of experiments, but we also wanted the teams to start thinking how to do the data-driven hypothesizing. And because this took a little bit more time and we started to see the benefits, especially on the conversion rate with data-driven hypothesizing, we also helped a lot of the teams to shift towards a planned testing approach as opposed to ad hoc approach. And then, of course, the highlight of last year was winning the Experimentation Culture Award. Why was this a really big news for us? Well, first of all, because our experimentation program was relatively young, because the changes that happened, we felt they were really good and really big, but this was only internal perception of how we were doing. And the Experimentation Culture Award was an external view of our success and our progress. And this was really great. We won an award and received it in our in our offices, called our top management to also receive it with us, made a lot of celebration, a lot of talk about that. And we actually opened the door to thinking about how we can use experimentation in broader sense. So at that point, we were working just in one division, one marketing division, but then we started to get questions, how can we go further? And how can we use experimentation in other places in our organization? But back at the beginning, so in 2022, for us, it was very clear that for us, the ambition of the experimentation program is to build an experimentation culture. Now, if you think about the definition of what experimentation culture is, there isn't one perfect one, but I found one in Optimize the blog, which I really liked. And it says experimentation culture is an organizational mindset and environment that embraces continuous testing, learning, and iteration to drive innovation and improvement. So when you think about that, experimentation culture is not just about running experiments. It actually requires a commitment, a long-term commitment to all the changes that you need to make within the organization so you can change the behaviors and the way of working and also the way of thinking, how we come up with the ideas, how we test them, and how we make decisions at the end of the day. So it was very, very clear from the beginning that experimentation is a change management topic for us. And we had a few big challenges that we had to face first before we were able to move a needle, essentially. We had to have the support from senior management, and senior management really liked the idea, so they were supporting us, but we needed to work with them to make sure that they are also learning together with us what is their role and what are the behaviors and the changes that they need to make in their way of working in order to help us to build the experimentation culture. And some of you may know this very famous experimentation industry word called hippos. We don't want any hippos. Hippo stands for highest paid person's opinion. And experimentation is supposed to be fighting those hippos in the room that we have, right? So basically, and Jim Barksdale quoted this really well. It says, if we have data, let's look at data. And if we have our opinions, let's go with mine, right? So you want to make sure that the senior management is getting away from having a lot of hippo moments and coming closer to saying, okay, we need more data in order to make the right decision. The next big challenge that we had was really the buy-in from the middle management. Now, we treated the beginning of the program, we treated very much in the same way how we do everything in the company. So we start with the numbers and then we do everything else later. So we started out also by giving the volume targets for experiments to our teams, right? Because that's always what we do in order to get the focused performance. Then we give the teams the targets. Yeah? But we saw that this was not really making any change in the way that the middle management saw basically the need to do any more experiments. They were fighting back and saying, this is just another target that I need to achieve. How do we get it done quick and dirty? Yeah, that's very normal. And usually what we do after we set up the targets, we develop a lot of KPIs because, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. And then we develop reports, and they're extensive reports and more extensive reports, and we're reporting all the time. That's how we do things usually, right? And that's a lot of overhead, especially if you think about the operational level. Those are the people that need to run the experiments. They're getting a lot of things on top without getting the necessary support from their direct superiors, right? So we had the targets, we had no motivation basically to get the experiments jump-started. And finally, after talking to a lot of people within the organization, we recognized that actually there was a big fear of failing. So every time we were talking about experiments, somehow we kept on hearing that people did not want to run the experiments and fail, or they didn't want to run the experiments that didn't work. And we started to understand that we have a completely wrong perception of experimentation. So nobody's thinking of, I need to run more tests to be more successful, to be more efficient. Everybody's thinking, I don't want to run too many tests that end up being a failure. So we thought, okay, that's not very good. So we have really big barriers in the buy-in, and this is certainly one of them that we need to work on, right? There we go, 3 big challenges at hand that we started to work on, basically all together from different aspects within the organization. So first of all, it was very clear for us that we needed to create some kind of a safe environment for testing and learning. So we needed to get the operational level colleagues to learn how to do the tests and to feel free to explore and to experiment, basically how to experiment. So we spent most of the first year and a good part of the second year upskilling them. So a lot of trainings, a lot of targeted trainings, a lot of general trainings. And we also started to introduce in bits the scientific parts because experimentation does require scientific rigor. So we were basically breaking this down in bits and pieces and making it basically understandable for the marketers who needed to use the new language and the new way of working. And my colleague and I, so the two dedicated experts, we were really giving hands-on support for every single experiment that was done. So really holding everybody by hand and saying, you can do this, let's do this together. We provided the templates. We go through the process a few times, and if you repeat it, you will actually learn it quite easily. And we promoted this pancake approach, which means, so like, if you do your first experiment, don't expect it to be perfect. Probably the second one won't be either. But the more that you do it, every single experiment will become better than the previous one. So it's exactly like pancakes, right? So usually the first pancake that you make, it's never good enough because the skillet is not warm enough, or the dough is too thick or too thin. So the first one never really works out. The second one is a little bit better, and the third one is already starting to look good. So we always say pancake approach, feel free to try your experiment. It doesn't have to be perfect. We just need to make sure that it's providing reliable data at the end. And finally, when we were building the processes, how to run experiments, we tried to build them into the existing processes and to work with the existing tools. Why? Because we felt, okay, it's a new thing that people are doing. They need to learn the new language. They need to learn the new process. And we said, all right, let's build it in a way that there's minimum changes to how they're working in any case. We're sticking to the tools that they're familiar with and not getting away a whole lot from the way of working. So to decrease basically this barrier that there is a lot to learn before they're able to start experimenting. And what we started to see is that from these 12 teams, every once in a while, there is somebody who becomes really interested in running their first experiment. And that's the biggest thing. Once they run their first experiment, guess what? The next thing they want to do is they want to run the second one. So we started to see that there are a couple of brave colleagues who started to do experiments, and they wanted to do a little bit more. And we said, great, these are our experimentation pioneers. And we need to make sure that we're giving them the space where they can talk about not only the experiments they're running, but also the process and the experience that they have while doing the experiments, right? So we were thinking of all kinds of, this is, by the way, the real picture of one of the stages and one of the events that we made. So we were thinking of different meetings, different formats, different events, and we were giving them the stage time so they can talk to their peers, to their colleagues, and tell them how it was for them. And we saw that this had a much bigger impact on building the trust and removing this fear barrier that it's too complex, it's too scientific, it's something that I cannot do on my own, because their peers were telling them, actually, it's not that bad. You need to understand a few things. And we also have the colleagues who are helping us, just give it a try. Right? So this peer-to-peer trust and peer-to-peer communication really helped us to bring this whole interest within the division in running experiments. And of course, what we were doing is we were really recognizing the efforts, we were recognizing the boldness, of the things that we wanted to test out. So we were really giving a positive environment overall for these experimentation pioneers to kind of spread the word within their teams. Still, back to the middle management. Things are starting to pick up, but we're still seeing a lot of pushback and not a lot of buy-in. So experiments are happening when there is time, when we really have to. So when we are told that we have to run. So we started to think back and we said, all right, the motivation is just not there. So we have the volume targets. This didn't really move the needle. We have the operational level that's kind of, starting to be interested. Still, the middle management needs to be there because ultimately they're deciding where the resources and where the time within their team goes. So we looked a little bit into the psychology. We looked at some neuroscientific studies. And of course, it was quite clear that if you want somebody to change the way of doing things, or you want them to start doing things, the rewards are working a lot better than the punishments. An alternative is also true. If you want somebody to stop from doing something, then punishments are working better than the rewards. And then we thought, all right, so maybe volume targets are not the best way to go, because essentially, if you're not reaching your targets, in a way, you are being punished. So the second year of experimentation, we did something rather unconventional. We killed all the targets. So no teams were having any targets for the experiments. And we introduced a rewards program. And this rewards program was based on looking at the progress. So how much the teams are learning to experiment, how they're developing in their approach, and of course, the impact of the experiments that they're doing. And we spent quite a bit of time of thinking through what are the relevant rewards? What is something that's really valuable, something that people would really want to win, they want to fight for, right? And then we thought, okay, we also have to have the right format because we want to make sure that everybody understands why somebody or some team is being rewarded. And this is how we came up as part of the rewards program to have live experimentation rewards events, internal events. We do them twice a year. And this is basically the place where we are bringing the teams together. We are promoting all the wonderful things that they're doing, giving them the recognition, giving them the praise, and also giving out the rewards live in front of, their peers, but also the management. And of course, while we communicated them as rewards events, this was our key platform for knowledge sharing. So we had the teams talking about most interesting, most challenging, most appealing, let's say, experiments from their perspective, sharing the knowledge and triggering the discussion, which was really, really important because in all of these events, we made sure, first of all, that the senior management had to be present. And we highly encouraged also the middle management, which we got, by the way, most of them were showing up all the time for these events. And then we can create basically the stage where we are openly talking about things that we are doing and challenging the way that we used to do things before. And I will show you later an example of two, I think, very interesting discussions that we had. And we had to basically make sure that the management and the operational level are feeling the same way about what it means to test, to learn, and to challenge the status quo. And we took senior management on the learning journey. And this was really important because we usually start with thinking, okay, senior management already knows everything and they just tell us what to do and then we follow it. But it wasn't like that. We always set up experimentation as a learning journey for all of us, even the experimentation experts. We said we need to learn together, we need to adapt, and we need to basically move at our own pace. So our senior managers, we included them basically in co-creating the rewards program. Why? Because they also needed to understand that experimentation is not about having a few big bang experiments that are bringing you millions of viewers. This happens every once in a while, right? This is not about that. It's about changing the way that we're always bringing the new ideas through, about getting more insights, getting more data, and basically making the decisions based on data and not opinions. We also gave them the jury duty because that gave them the opportunity to look at all of the experiments done and to discuss how the teams were developing. And of course, we always gave them a bit of the stage time in all of these events. And this worked out really well, right? So we were openly talking about how experimentation helps us in the strategic topics that we are working on, how we can use it, for example, to become more customer-centric and so on. And rewards were, of course, that they're a lot of fun. So I think we gave out about 15 rewards over 2 years, both individual rewards and the team rewards. So, for example, we were rewarding colleagues with tickets to international experimentation conferences. We were giving teams a day off and paying for a team activity to kind of celebrate their success. So we created a lot of buzz. And we even created a bit of competition. Not that we wanted to, but the teams were simply really liking this. And they said, hey, this is really interesting. We want to get some of these rewards. So they were trying also a little bit harder with their experiments and checking out, hey, are you counting our experiments? And are we in the bucket for being nominated and so on. So the rewards were really, really a positive way to kind of look at everything that is happening and how things are changing within our division. And the last thing that we had to discuss is this perceived high chance of failure when it comes to experimentation. And here I brought basically something that we were told by the management very early on. We said, if we want to know if we're testing the right things, we want to also make sure that we're avoiding a high number of failed experiments, right? So we need to report on how we are doing, and we want to make sure we're avoiding a high number of failed experiments. And I thought, well, that's very interesting. Why are we so afraid of making a high number of failed experiments when we are launching just like 4, 5, 6, 10 experiments, right? So why is this failure existing? And of course, if we start to think about how experimentation is communicated by those who have been, in experimentation game for 20 years, the most, successful companies in the world, like Google's and Amazon's, they actually always talk about the failure and they never talk about success. And here I brought one of the quotes from Jeff Bezos, which says, most large organizations embrace the idea of invention, but are not willing to suffer a string of failed experiments necessary to get there. Booking, who is famous, of course, for having fantastic experimentation program already for many years, they're very famous for quoting 9 out of 10 experiments fail. We are terrible at guessing, and most of our experiments are basically failing. And if we think about also how the process of experimentation is defined, it says experiment, fail, learn, repeat. Yeah, so we are always talking about the failure. Nobody's talking about success. So we said, all right, we got to tackle this. We have to define very clearly what is a failed experiment. Now, when you get a result that's statistically significant and it's showing you a drop compared to your control group, this is not a failed experiment, because discovering a drop early on and using a small sample size to test that out is extremely important, because you figure out that this idea that you wanted to launch can hurt your revenues, it can hurt customer experience, whatever. It's harmful. We shouldn't do it. And that's very good, because you're not causing a lot of harm. You're doing this very early on, and you're stopping investment of resources into ideas which are not very good. So actually, having experiments which are showing drops, this is successful. This is very, very successful, important experiment. What about flat experiments? So these are the experiments that don't have any statistical significant results. Are they a failed experiment? Absolutely not, because remember, you're always testing something that you believe is better than what we currently have, right? And when you find out this is not something that's making any difference, the question is why? So usually flat experiments are a great basis for getting new ideas into the pipeline and developing something new that you want to test. So flat experiments are also successful experiments. And finally, usually there are many organizations which are using the labels for experiments as winners and losers. So winners are the uplifts and losers are the drops. And this actually we found to be a really bad label, because it's really hard to use this kind of language in a large organization where you say, I had done, a couple of experiments, but they were all losers. Who's going to be happy to go around and talk like this? So we said, no, we're not going to do this labeling. First of all, we are going to define the failed experiment as the one that we could not complete end to end. That means that the experiment had to be stopped because of any technical glitches, for example, or any issues in your data, or if there is an abrupt change in the strategy or market, and when you say, okay, this is no longer relevant, I'm just going to stop it. So basically, a failed experiment is the one that you had to stop because it could not provide reliable data. That is the only failed experiment. All other experiments are successful experiments. So we are always repeating this and teaching everybody to understand that, still to this day. And second thing is, we decided to track success in a very, very different way than how we usually do it, right? Because the value of experimentation is not only monetary. You're learning a lot of things all the time. You're helping with getting new ideas, with discovering some things that you never knew. And you're always getting into this optimization mode, which is very, very healthy. And you cannot always measure this through revenue impact. So we actually started with KPIs in the first year. They had nothing to do with financials. So we started with like volume of experiments that we have, democratization KPIs, so how many teams, how many people are running experiments. We made statistically significant rate more important than the win rate. Highly, highly unlikely for many of the organizations. And we actually used maturity assessment of our program to say, how successful are we in changing the organization, in changing the behaviors and the mindset in order to test more and to make more data-driven decisions. So one of the things that's, I don't know if it's ever been done within the company before us, but basically what we did is that for a full first year of experimentation, we never produced a single financial report. Was it easy? No, because during this first year, the management was listening, they're coming along quite good, but every once in a while they say, we need proof, show me the money that we're going into the right direction, right? And we said, course, we will show the money, but it's not the right time to do this at the very beginning. We need to allow a little bit of time to get momentum, to get some volume, to learn some things before we start the financial measurement. And what happens is that in the beginning, if you're running very few experiments, the value overall is very small. And when you're not getting all the buy-in and nobody really understands fully what the value of experimentation is, you're going to get into constant discussions as to why should we invest resources, why should we go into this direction, this is not really worth it, we have a lot of other activities that can bring us a lot of money. You want to avoid these discussions, right? So that's why we didn't start showing the financials until a little bit later. Secondly, we wanted to remove this presumption that every experiment has to bring some positive financial impact in order to be successful, right? So this whole story of what is a failed experiment and how we measure the value, understanding that the value of experimentation is different to how we measure value in general of the things that we're doing, takes quite a bit of time. It takes a lot of trust, and we needed to prove that and to teach the organization this, right? So 1 year later, so beginning of 2023 is the first time when we produced the full performance report, which also included the financials. And this is an extract basically on the experimentation program value, which is shown as the impact on revenue. And what you can see here basically is that we have a revenue gain. So this is the total money that's coming from all the experiments with an uplift. You have revenue loss avoided, so all the money we're saving because we tested and we saw a drop and we stopped basically from launching this and losing the money. And the overall impact, financial impact of the experiment is the sum of these two, right? This is what we showed. And because we took a year to educate the whole organization what it means, this was quite accepted when we showed it, but it's very different to how we show the financial impact for all of the other things that we are doing.
Just to flag about just under 10 minutes left, Marta.
Perfect. 2 examples and we're done. So
Great.
how do we know that business as usual is actually taking place? Business as usual means we are testing without questioning, should we test, why should we test, is that we are going into direction of daring to test things that we think we know. This is really, really important. And I want to show you 2 examples. This is a pricing test. We ran it through an email campaign. And what we wanted to do is we said, all right, we already made a business case because we already knew that when we adopt a price of one-time activation fee for one of our internet products, we are going to basically make quite a good sum of money because it will not make a change in the uptakes, right? So we had some €5 increase that was already calculated, already in the business case, go ahead and do it. The team was brave enough and said, all right, but we want to test it. Why should you test it? Well, we want to test it just to make sure that the assumptions we have in the business case are actually right. And we want to throw in even another better thing. So not €5, but €10 and see what happens. And the hypothesis was, the one that we were quite convinced on, is that there will not be any statistically significant impact on the uptakes. All right, so we measure that. What do you think happened for the €5? We had statistically significant drop of almost 60% on uptakes, right? 60%, jaw dropping. But the funny thing is, the €10 one was also statistically significant, but it was less. So it was minus 32%, right? So this raised a lot of hot discussions with the management. So these numbers can't be right. This doesn't even make sense because, you know, the higher price gets even less negative impact. This is not very good. Okay, so the team says, all right, let us test it again. Why do you need to test it again? We need to make sure that the data is good. So what did they do? They tested this again and confirmed the results. And this was really, really bold. This is like, you know, we are always doing the numbers first, testing later, right? And for the first time, we talked about strategically important topic where we said, this is not the right way to do it. We need to test the ideas first before we start building business cases around that and believing that something is actually going to make a positive difference before testing it out. And the second and the last example that I want to show you was for the optimization of the customer journey on our website, where we wanted to change the way that we're showing the tariffs, again, for some internet products. The tariffs are shown for the mobile devices and also on the desktops in a way that you need to scroll from left to right in order to see all the tariffs. So this is our control group, right? So you're scrolling left to right. And what the team did, they said, well, this is not very intuitive. We did some usability testing and nobody's scrolling left to right. When you have your mobile device, you're used to going up and down. So they redesigned basically this page and they said, all right, we believe we can get a lot more engagement, a lot more clicks on this CTA button by changing this to an intuitive way of testing. What happened? Of course, it was a winner. Really great results, much more positive impact than what we anticipated. So they implemented that, and the decision was like, okay, great. Can you also do that for mobile tariffs? Because this was for internet tariffs. Just implement it. It makes a lot of sense. And team said, well, we kind of want to test it first. Why? We already have data. Well, we still want to test it. All right. So they went and they tested exactly the same thing for the mobile phone tariffs, right? So the control was the existing horizontal view. The treatment was the vertical view. And guess what? Vertical view didn't work. This was really hard. They repeated the test, confirmed it again. It was not working for the mobile tariffs. So then they started, of course, with a whole lot of new questions as to why this is not working on one page versus the other. And then the new tests came through. Right? So really, really important to get to this point, to be very brave, to be daring and testing the things which you are sure that you already know. The last thing is the summary and the biggest learnings that we had over the last 3 years, a bit more than 3 years, is that experimentation is actually all about the people. It's so much less about the processes and the tools. It's really a lot about the people. So we invested most of the time and most of the activities focusing on people, on getting the motivation high, on giving the empowerment to the operational level to run the tests and to feed this data into decision making. And we were celebrating all kinds of successes, no matter how small they were along the way, and that really helped. Sharing all the knowledge, all the experience was very, very important. We were very loud about the progress, not just the experiments and how much impact they were making. We were making sure that we can share all of this in all kinds of different formats, talk about it all the time. And we recognized that basically balancing this bottom-up and top-down approach was necessary. You need both in order to get the buy-in and to change things and build a culture essentially of experimentation. And it's totally okay to be unconventional, also in large organizations, which are quite traditional and which are hard to change. It's actually very important that you're free to experiment with your experimentation, to adapt it to the environment that you have so that you can change it in a way that it makes sense, and to find the proper way to track the value of experimentation. That was one of the important things that we had to do. And if I can leave you with one last thought, it's that all experiments have value, and some also have monetary value. So please take that with you.
I love it. Thank you, Marta. This is wonderful, wonderful. So I think there are a lot of questions in the queue, but maybe I'll get us started with one or two. One is the first and most frequent question I get when it comes to experimentation, especially from folks who either aren't digital first or are coming from smaller organizations. It's, we don't have a lot of users. We don't have a high volume of users, or we don't have a lot of resources. How do I actually think about getting started in developing useful experiments when our audience is so small or our tool set is so small? Do you have any tips for folks?
Yeah, so there are different ways. So experimentation, so running, these are called randomized controlled experiments, or A/B tests as we know them. So this is one of the ways to have. That is one of the things that are basically requirements. So if you want to test for small changes, you do need a sizable audience. So that's something to keep in mind. So one of the things that you can do is to really spend some time into ideation phase. So getting all the data for the ideas that you have, and try to get basically prioritization of those ideas which you think are really going to have a big impact. So based on all the data that you have, and then test on those. And then you can see, all right, based on the small audience, even with the small audience, if you're having a big impact, you can still see statistically significant results. And sometimes it's also okay to simply try it out and see how it works, and also to plan it out ahead of time. Like for the web experiments, sometimes we have pages with not a lot of traffic, and we plan them ahead and say, all right, so instead of the usual 2 weeks that we need to test, for this one, we might need 5 or 6 weeks. Is this still good enough for the decision? Yes. Okay, go for it. So those are some of the things that can be done.
That's awesome. Very, very helpful. And I think timing is a really nice piece of that people neglect. Okay, I loved the pancake metaphor. That was great. Never good enough the first time. I don't even make pancakes anymore. I get so discouraged. But question for you, how do you balance the need for experimentation? You talked a little bit about how you balance it against the need to show progress, and that's kind of like all of the things that you did to signal what we were looking for. But how do you balance it against workloads or other priorities?
This is really hard. It's actually one of the major issues we had in the first year of experimentation because it just came on top of everything else. And of course, there are no teams which have spare resources. There is no such thing in the organization, right? So that means if you're adding something on top, either something else has to fall off or this gets deprioritized. And that's why we couldn't get enough experiments in the pipeline. One of the things that really helps is to get away from this spaghetti or ad hoc testing approach where you're just like, okay, I have an idea and I want to test it. And the team goes, well, we cannot do this for another 6 weeks or 2 months, and then it becomes irrelevant. It's to actually, when they do, so our teams do quarterly planning. We started to encourage them to do experiments planning as part of their regular planning. And this really made a big difference. Unfortunately, we were not able to convince them in the first year to do that. So it took a year and a bit before they started to shift. And to be honest, it was only last year when most of the teams have shifted away from ad hoc testing and into more into the planned approach. And that's why we could sustain all the volume and still keep on growing. Yeah, so that's one of the critical points. Otherwise, no, you're not going to get additional resources. No, you're never going to get higher priority. It's all about having them in the plan. And this is why middle management is so important. Because if middle management says this is not high priority, it's never going to get into the backlog, right? So this was one of the critical things that we said, okay, middle management needs to say, hey, we need to test this, make sure you're running experiments for it.
Oh, I didn't know if you were going to jump in, Katie. I was waiting to see if you were unmuting. Okay. This is critical stuff. Marta, that was spectacular. If it's okay with you, I'm going to turn it over to the audience. Are you ready?
Absolutely. I hope so.
Okay, well, the first questioner we know well is Junaid in New York City. So, Junaid, you want to rock the mic and ask your question with your smartest voice?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Ryan. Hey, thank you so much, Marta, for that presentation. Really appreciate it. I think you answered kind of like the first part of my question really through your presentation. I asked it like really early on, so apologies. But I think my question's really more centered around like, I guess, how do you justify if you're in a like so you work at a larger telecom company and like the need or like or at least to be able to tie the experimentation you were doing to revenue seemed like a little bit easier. But let's say if you're earlier stage and you know you're trying to kind of convince your executives to invest in experimentation, but it's not very clear, and there's also not incentives from like the current customer base. Like, how do you get them to like see that experimentation as something that you need to start doing now? Is it like a focus on the sales opportunities that maybe you're not getting from doing experimentation? Is it like, I don't know, like I guess how would you do that in a kind of an early stage company where like, yeah, it's a not as easy thing to do?
I think this is an issue no matter how big the company is, because everybody, when they think of experimentation, they are like, okay, we think about conversion, right? We want to get more sales. That's why we want to run experiments, right? And I think you need to buy the time, no matter how big the company is, to say, actually, we got to learn how to do this thing because it's a tool, it's a skill, and it's something that we need to learn. We also don't know everything about our customers. We don't know everything about the market, and we need to test in order to learn more and to find those opportunities to innovate or to optimize or to build something, right? So I think, and this was really hard, so please don't get me wrong, so it wasn't like all very easy to be done. We had a lot of tough discussions because it was always like, you know, where is the conversion? Where is the money? Like, this needs to be bringing us big money. You know, all the agencies come externally and they tell us, you know, we can run a few experiments and bring you 10 million euros. It doesn't really work like that. So it's like you need a lot of tests, because the more tests that you run, you're increasing the chances of learning what is working and what is not working. And experimentation is not about the big bang that brings you millions. This happens every once in a while if you're very lucky, but in general, it's always about making these small optimizations. But if you make a lot of them, then the cumulative sum of what you're doing through all of these optimizations can actually be quite big, right? As big as something that's quite disruptive. So these are constant, I would say it's really constant education. And I think this is for our management. I think it was very clear. And I'm very grateful that I had senior management who was so open to being challenged. Say, I also don't know, let's learn together. We need space to experiment and to find out what is the right thing for us. And we're not big millions in the first year. It's just not going to happen. Yeah. So that's what worked for us.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you, Marta. To our next wonderful person in New York City, Avi, are you still around?
Hey, yeah, I'm in North Carolina.
Oh, you
All
wrote,
good.
oh, NC. I see.
Yeah,
NC.
you're
That's
fine.
cool. I get it.
Thanks so much, Marta. I really value the lessons that you shared and great question earlier. I was curious on just the data complexity of being able to implement this. And a lot of orgs have different data systems between different teams, which can make it hard to connect the dots, but then also just enabling folks to kind of have more be more empowered to do analysis or approach the interpretation side. Or are there any tools you used or any kind of standard curriculum components that helped make that more approachable?
Mm-hmm. So again, we're using all digital channels. So this is a benefit to us. So we have email, we have SMS, we have web, we have app, we have self-service on the web. So we're using all the digital channels, and we had different teams that are dealing with all of these channels. So we said basically, first of all, let's explore the tool set that we have. And essentially, we have a lot of tools that are already in place. So this was a big advantage. But we never really use them for testing. So just to give you a sense of campaigning, so our email campaigns that go out, so we actually campaigns go to emails, SMSs, push notifications to the app. We use Salesforce for that. So what we figured out is like, okay, so let's use Salesforce to run the test. Is this possible? Yes. How do we do it? Let's do it. Okay, let's try it out. It's not so bad. So we built basically how you experiment was very easy adaptation to how the teams were building campaigns in Salesforce, as an example. So we tried to kind of figure out, okay, do we already have the know-how how to use the existing tools, and how difficult is it to use this tool to basically run the experiments? Yeah. For the web, it was a little bit more difficult because we didn't have the skills across the board for all of the teams. So we had to build kind of the super users. So one of two people who were very interested, they learn how to use the tool, which also helps if it's very easy to use. And then they were also supporting the other colleagues. So experimentation experts in the sense of how to design the experiment, what is the whole process looking like, and then having really the tool experts to say, hey, I'm going to help you with the first couple of experiments that you're building in the tool. Right? So supporting like peer-to-peer basically, because our center of excellence for experimentation, it was just 2 people supporting a division of more than 100 people. So we had to think about other ways how we help each other.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. To Pablo, can you come on the mic and tell us your question? Uh-oh. Is Pablo no longer with us? Oh, well, how about Carol, the Canadian? Carol, are you around? Because that was a fun alliteration. Oh, there you are, Carol.
Yes, hi. Hi, Ryan. Hi, Marta.
Hi. Oh, you went on mute.
Sorry. We work at a bank, and consistency is a big challenge for us. So we have various subcultures, deeply embedded subcultures across teams. And so some of our teams experiment not at all, and some of them need to experiment much more. And we also have teams that are just throwing spaghetti at the wall and not getting any results and don't have any process. So how would you go about creating change and getting consistency?
I don't know if you can create consistency. This is a very, very long-term goal in a large organization. I think what's really important is to allow the teams to develop at their own pace, because first of all, In our case, not every team has equal opportunity to test. So just to give you an example, you have a team that deals with having 1 million customers. That is a huge base that you can work with. And then you have another team that's working with 50,000 customers. That's not a big base, right, that you have. So that means not, first of all, not everybody has equal chance to running a lot of experiments, and that's okay. That's one thing. Second thing is it really helps for those teams which are really hard to crack, to get them going into the regular testing, is to get the management to kind of define, are there any strategic topics which are really important for us where we are not having enough data, we don't have enough insights in order to make the right decisions so that we can achieve our strategic goals. And this really makes a difference, because then you pick one thing, you pick one strategic topic, and you say, all right, we got to do a little bit more testing in order to run this. And the team starts perceiving this to say, oh, of course, we don't have the data. And it's not just about experiments. I also have to say that it's about finding the right research method, because experiments are not good for everything. And that's also okay, because then experiments can come on top, or they can come only in part, but also doing the research and getting into this moment of, okay, I need more data to help me achieve the goals. And that's for some of the teams where we had more difficulty to get them started. This really helped. And still to say, so 3.5 years later, we still have big differences in the amount and frequency and quality. So the skill set between the teams. So I think that's a very, very long-term goal, to get everybody to be consistent and on the same level and understanding you test first, then you make a decision. And that's okay. I mean, that's totally okay. Ryan, you're muted in case you want to say something.
Oh, can you hear me, Marta?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay, I don't know where, maybe Ryan's...
Ryan is muted. This is what I see on my screen.
Well,
so
I can, while he's muted, I can go to the next question, which is, there was another one from Pablo. I don't know whether he's back. And if not, that's fine. We've got Jess, who's got 2 questions from New York City. Jess, do you want to come and say hi?
Hi,
Yeah.
how are you? Oh,
Yeah.
hi, Ryan.
Screen froze up. So Jess, yeah, take it away.
Hey. So I think this builds off of the last question from Carol, which is, what resources do you recommend for training a team to learn how to experiment well? You had mentioned earlier that, certain research methods don't always apply to certain questions that you have. And so, where can I get started in helping kind of socialize this with my teams?
Mm-hmm. So training and upskilling overall is really multifaceted, I would say. So learning by doing is the best way to do it. So I have to say that. And because this is, once people run their first experiment, they get hooked. This is for sure like this, yeah? So they get the feel for it, they really like it, and they want to try it again, right? So get them to do it and support them in doing this. So get an expert who understands how to set up the proper experiment and guide them. Say, hey, let's do this together. It's not so bad. And I help you from A to Z to get through the whole process. We also developed the basics of experimentation training that we ran for everybody. So the first year we ran those many, many times. So it's like giving always every 2 months, there is the next date, join if you can. There is the next date, join if you can. And we did this on all the levels. So we included also the middle management to join us for this basics training to understand it. Then we had bits and pieces on specific topics that we wanted to familiarize everybody with. So that would be something in the tool, like the web testing tool is something you have to learn. We also developed a lot of internal tools, like how to do the sample size testing, how to check for the SRM, how to check for statistical significance. And we were always doing this small targeted, hey, 30 minutes, grab your lunch, let's learn something together. And then we were repeating this and using this all the time. The reward events were also a great learning opportunity, because people start thinking and talking to each other that otherwise don't have a connection to each other. So this was very good in breaking silos and getting all of this information. So essentially, there is many, many different ways. And how you start, we started with developing this basic training. Everybody needs to run through these 4 hours of training to understand, what is experimentation all about? What does it mean? Why should we do it? So you need to kind of get into the door to say, All right, I'm interested in learning more at least. I don't want to do it, but I want to learn more. And that's also getting into the door. That's how we did it.
I see we're at time, so I won't ask my second question.
Yeah, thank you so much. My computer's being a little finicky here, but hopefully you can see the screen. But first of all, a round of applause for Marta. That was really spectacular. I was sitting there thinking, when does the book come out, Marta? Because we all want to get your book about this autographed, limited edition, chop, get writing. But thank you again for your time and energy. Marta, I think you put your QR code up if you want to put your LinkedIn in the chat.
That's the QR
And
code for LinkedIn.
what's that? Oh,
That's the QR code for LinkedIn. So
cool.
that's how you connect with me via LinkedIn. And if there are any questions that I could not address, send it to me. I try to answer them, or reach out to LinkedIn and ask any questions. I'm always happy to share the experience and also to learn from others. There is so much learning to be done on a daily basis. This is what I find anyhow.
No, it was somebody said the other day, every day school's in session, right?
Absolutely.
Every day school's in session.
I agree.
Thank you though all for your time and energy today, especially you, Marta, coming all the way to us from Vienna via the interwebs. Should you want to work with us at Irrational Labs, reach out to Katie Dove, one of our managing directors at irrationallabs.com. Want to stay in the loop? Make sure you're following our newsletter, getting all the latest in B-Sci coming from here, there, and everywhere, as the Beatles may have said. And then if you're really interested in the product teardowns, Kristen Berman's Substack is all the rage. Can't wait till it becomes a Netflix special. One day, I know it will become a Netflix special. But at any rate, thank you all again for your energy. Please go out, have a wonderful evening, afternoon, morning, depending on where you are. I'm in Chicago. It's midday here, so it's probably the evening for you, Marta. So have a great Friday night to our friends in Europe and beyond. And everyone else, we'll see you next time. Take care.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for being here. Take care.